Hi everybody, how you doing? I'm Sonny Rapone,
And I'm Doug Carpenter.
and we are Precision Accounting Consulting, and this is the Profit Principle Podcast. Hi, how you doing? I'm Sonny Rapone, host of the Profit Principle Podcast. Today, my guest is Euripides Pelekanos, co-founder and CEO of Bareburger. Today, I just wanted to get into, to bring Euripides on and discuss more about the restaurant industry. You know, we find here at Precision, we deal with a lot of restaurants in the accounting industry, and we find that more today, due to the economic landscape, more are failing than succeeding. You know, so I wanted to bring Euripides on because he's one that's made his restaurant and his franchise succeed. And I wanted him to come on and tell us a little bit about his story and his restaurants all on basically Long Island, New York, Connecticut. He's been all over the place. So it's been a pleasure to have him on today. So Euripides, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sonny, for having me. So as Sonny mentioned, I'm Euripides Pelekanos, otherwise known as EP. That's for short, obviously. I obviously have a very complicated, long, rambling name. So, Sonny, you know, I've been in the restaurant business since probably early 2000, like 1999 to 2000. My first venture into the industry was I owned a nightclub / music venue bar in Brooklyn in a neighborhood called Clinton Hill. That's right now a very trendy neighborhood in Brooklyn. But imagine 25 years ago, it wasn't that kind of a neighborhood. It was a little bit of like a rough around the edges kind of neighborhood.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, we found a really awesome opportunity. We opened up a 5,000 square foot music venue / art space / kitchen. And, you know, we ran it for like 7-8 years. And towards the tail end of it, we introduced burgers to our menu. We were serving a lot of fun, exotic meats, ostrich, bison, elk. And then 2008 rolls around and you have, call it a global crisis, a global economic meltdown.
Yeah.
And it trickled down, obviously, to New York. And that neighborhood sort of took a turn for the worse. We decided we needed to make a move somewhere else, another venture, because it was just a dying business.
Okay.
So one of my partners there, John, and my brother and some other guys approached us, and you know they wanted to open up a Five Guys franchise in Whitestone and Bayside, Queens.
Interesting.
And they said, we want to buy this franchise. And I said, hey, I have this. We've been working on this really cool burger concept within the bar that's doing really well for us. And it was organic, it was sustainable, it was really edgy back then. And we said, and I sort of convinced them, instead of doing a Five Guys franchise, why don't you guys back us, put some money behind us? Mind you, we don't have any money back then.
Wow.
Still barely don't. And then we said, let's open up a restaurant in Queens. We were all from Astoria, and be highly focused on very small menu, organic burgers, organic salads, milkshakes, and we're trying to figure out, where we should open, what the model should be. We decide to go for a very off the beaten path avenue in Astoria on 31st Avenue. So
Yeah, I know.
Astoria has Broadway on that side of Astoria, Broadway, 31st Avenue, 30th Avenue.
Yes.
30th Avenue and Broadway is where all the businesses are, the restaurants and cafes. 31st Avenue is a very quiet avenue.
Yes.
And then you have the other side of Astoria, Ditmars, which has become very developed over the years, et cetera. So we open up on 31st Avenue. We take a dilapidated corner restaurant, corner bakery that's been shut down for about 2 years. We strike a good deal with the landlord. We open up 1,000 square feet, after like 6 months of toiling with permits and getting the design stuff down. We finally opened in 2009.
Okay.
And I remember my father saying to me, who the hell's going to pay $12 for a burger back in 2009, right? Like you're talking about people are defaulting on their mortgages, businesses are shutting down. And he's like, who's going to pay $12 for a burger?
That's a great deal now.
Yeah, think about that, right? So, back then our logo was like this hippie type of bear riding on a unicycle. And there's like a poster outside the construction site. And we open up, there's like 200 people waiting to come into this restaurant. Never seen anything, blew away all our expectations.
Wow.
Like total gangbusters. Like they all thought we were some company from California, given sort of like the vibe and the feel of the restaurant.
Yeah.
So fast forward a bit, we sort of get the sense you get the sense you captured lightning in a bottle somehow,
Okay.
So we decide, let's start franchising. Let's start opening up other restaurants. We open up a second restaurant in the city by NYU. And mind you, both these restaurants are still operating today.
Was this before Astoria became trendy? Like when
Astoria was, this was before, when I say trendy, I mean like Astoria has gone through its sort of waves of different people, and call it gentrification, call it what you want. Astoria has been that neighborhood, in the last 20 years because of its proximity to Manhattan.
Yes.
And back then, what people would say it's affordability, which sort of has changed now. It's always in the last 20 years, it's become an area where people have moved to, and then from all different parts of the country, not just immigrants.
Yeah.
And traditionally, it was a Greek, Italian, Irish neighborhood.
Well, I remember I grew up in Jackson Heights.
So you know it very well.
Yeah.
And then it goes through its waves. You have a different group of immigrants that come through, and now it's sort of mixed with a very cosmopolitan young professional, and that's been going on for 20 years.
Okay.
So they've developed it. New buildings have gone up, and obviously the proximity to Manhattan has always been one of the big draws to that.
So that was the first location then, right?
That was the first location back in 2009.
Oh, okay, because I was always impression. I thought Plainview was. So see,
No.
Okay,
Plainview is later down.
Okay.
So further down the road. So we open up our second location in the city, in LaGuardia Place by NYU. It's not doing as well as our original location. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We have this beautiful location by Washington Square Park. It has a beautiful patio, and we realize that our awning doesn't say who we are. It just says Bareburger. And so we're going in there sort of cocky and saying like, oh, we're so busy in the story, they're going to know us in Manhattan. It doesn't translate at all. So we changed the awning. We put on the awning organic milkshakes, organic burgers, organic salads. And before you know it, like the place is just as busy or busier than Astoria.
Wow.
So then we say to ourselves, reconfirmed our original notion that we got a really good business here. Let's figure out how to grow this thing, before somebody steals the idea, before other competitors come around.
Who was your biggest competition when you started?
It's interesting to say, like, there was other restaurant groups that were doing the gourmet, call it the better burger segment.
Yeah, of course.
Locally, you had guys like Five Napkin. They were opening much larger, sort of restaurants. There was other sort of players, like we were lumped into the Five Guys sort of segment,
Yes.
but the Five Guys it's a fast foods model restaurant. We're a more sit down restaurant, fuller menu, alcohol, beer, wine.
Yes.
It's a different experience.
Right.
Put it that way. So, fast forward, we decide to start franchising. We start signing up some franchisees. Most of our franchisees in the beginning are friends, relatives, et cetera, people that we know in the neighborhood, and we start opening up restaurants in the city, in Brooklyn, Long Island.
Okay.
And it's happening quite fast.
Yeah.
In a matter of 5 years, we opened probably close to 30 restaurants.
Wow.
Right. Then we start getting some interest into opening up some international restaurants. Right.
Okay.
And mind you, I'm a kid that grew up in Astoria, Queens.
Yeah.
Right. I obviously am ambitious. I have aspirations. Nowhere in my wildest dreams did I think that somebody would want to take our concept, our brand, license it, and open it up in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Germany, Tokyo. And then these are all places that we ended up opening up
That's
Bareburger
unbelievable.
restaurants. And outside of those international restaurants, we had opportunities to open up in other places in the United States: Chicago, Santa Monica, Atlanta.
Okay.
We opened up a restaurant in Toronto. All license agreements and franchise agreements, except for Santa Monica. That was our restaurant. We wanted to put plant a seed or a flag in L.A.
Okay.
And it's actually really sad. I was obviously been following what's been going on in L.A. In that whole county in the last week or so, and we were right there in Santa Monica. Like I can imagine that our restaurant probably doesn't exist there anymore. Even though we've been out of the market, we sold that restaurant, but I'm pretty sure that thing is not standing. It's really sad.
Yeah, it is.
So fast forward, we're hitting like a really nice stride. We got close to 40 restaurants. Nationally, internationally.
And this is a matter of 5 years.
We went from 2011 when we started to 2016. Yeah, in 5 years, it's rapid, right? And it's robust. We're doing great. Some areas better than others, but overall, the rest the company, the brand is doing very well.
Okay.
2018 rolls around. We get some issues with one of our partners, sort of derails us a little bit. Typical story that happens with every business. Good story for another podcast about how to make sure all your contracts with your partners are sort of straightened up before you go into business with somebody. And then 2019 rolls around. We have a plan to raise some money, raise some equity through a combination of debt and capital, buy back some franchises because at that time we're very limited. Most of our restaurants are franchises. We want to buy some of them. We want to buy.
That's an option when you.
No, it's not an option, but it's a business transaction.
Okay.
You can go, but it's not written in the contract.
Okay.
But it's sort of like you go to your franchisees. Either they're doing well or they're struggling, and you say, "Let me see if I can buy these restaurants, roll them up into the group, either improve on them or continue. If their operations are doing well, etc."
Okay.
So we have a really good deal in 2019 to purchase restaurants, consolidate, to buy probably 10 units and make them corporate units because our plan was have more of a corporate sort of footprint and control of the brand and then continue to franchise out into outer markets, right?
Okay.
And then 2020 rolls around. Everyone knows what happens in 2020 with COVID. I'm not going to sit there and bemoan, all the, everything that happens. Everyone knows. All our restaurants that are overseas can't manage. They can't manage the pandemic. Supply chains get strained. Their marketing efforts get strained. Their budgets get strained. And, they... one by one, we start to see trouble on the horizon.
Okay.
Restaurants overseas start to close. Mind you, it's almost impossible to manage a restaurant in your own backyard, especially a group of restaurants. Imagine now overseeing or helping restaurants across state lines and across, international restaurants.
Of course,
right?
especially during the pandemic. I mean, it was crazy.
We couldn't travel to them. They all had different mandates on when they could open, how they could operate their businesses. So, these restaurants, it's painful. You see in the last 10 years, you're building up a brand. You get to 40 restaurants, which, to me is a successful, accomplishment, but not the end of it. That to me is just like sort of a beginning stepping stone to doing, larger stuff and bigger stuff. And then you take a massive step back, and then. In the last 4 years, for me personally, I sit there and I look at our brand, and I then come to the conclusion that the way we grew back then was not the right way to grow our brand and our company. We should have never. Never is the wrong word. They were opportunistic.
Okay.
They were opportunistic to open up these restaurants abroad. It was not strategic.
Okay.
The strategy from the beginning should have been. Control your backyard, your home base,
right,
and then expand outwards this way.
Get the model right in the first place.
The model's right, but don't overextend yourself. You can't sit there and open up one restaurant in another state and expect to market it properly or to have a supply chain that can sustain that restaurant and get the buying power that you can, within your own market.
Sure. Yeah.
So I look at other brands that made the same mistake I made 5 years ago, and I already see the writing on the wall. Yeah. They have a strong base in one area, and then they start signing up license agreements because somebody knocks on their door and says, "Hey, I really love your restaurant.
I've seen it all the time. Yeah.
I want to take your brand and open it up in South Carolina, North Carolina, Miami, or Florida."
Yeah.
And, as an owner of the company, you're like, sure. Yeah. It's like, wow, what an opportunity for me to expand my brand.
Right.
And then sometimes you don't do the proper diligence on who the group is coming in. Are they properly capitalized? Do they have the experience to do it and such?
Yes.
So I now sit back, after the pandemic, we're sitting here, it's 2025, and I have a totally new strategy. Like our strategy right now is every restaurant that we open is going to open in the tri-state area.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of, as we call in our industry, white space.
Well, let me ask you one thing.
Yeah,
also, after the pandemic, how many restaurants survived?
We had we lost about a dozen of them. So we went from actually probably a little bit more. We had 44, including the international, and we went down to 30.
Okay.
When all the dust settled throughout the pandemic, because it's not like all the restaurants closed,
Okay.
during the pandemic. They closed throughout the pandemic.
Right.
And, and everyone in the industry knows that, you have a restaurant and you've been surviving with PPP money or ERC money.
Oh, yeah.
And that money sort of, hits, and then your business hasn't come back, your business hasn't rebounded. You got to sort of look in the mirror and make the tough decision, let this thing go, move on to the next, cut your losses. So that was a decision that had to be made for a lot of the restaurants.
It's so funny you say that, because I've seen that being in this industry with a lot of the restaurants we have, after ERC and PPP ran out, we had the come to Jesus moment, like, listen, either you got to drop these restaurants or they're going to drag you down, because obviously you take more funding, right? More revenue from other restaurants to support the existing ones.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many restaurants we've seen shut down because of that. And you actually, putting your big boy pants on and saying, we need to make the hard decision here.
You need to make the hard, and then you sort of fall into a vicious cycle where these restaurants now have depleted those funds, and they can't go to a traditional bank these days and get a traditional loan.
Yep.
They need to go to hard money lenders. They need to go get MCA finance, whatever they need to do, and they're just kicking the can down the road. If the restaurant, we have restaurants that are fully have come back and actually have exceeded 2019 sales. Right?
Wow.
We have restaurants.
See that.
We have restaurants that are down. We have restaurants that are up 10% from 2019. We have restaurants that are down 20% from 2019.
Okay.
The silver lining to all this, from the way I see it, we have figured out how not only to survive, but how to make money with less sales. And there's a certain mindset and a resilience that you need as an operator in this business more than ever these days, right? It's I call it, when I speak to all our managers and everyone in our company, we never had this mindset before, but we have it now, which is we count every penny that comes in and out of the door. And I don't care if it's $2 or if it's $20 or if it's $100, it all adds up. And it comes from your energy costs. It comes from how labor is being scheduled in the restaurant. It comes how food cost is being budgeted. It comes to negotiations with your landlord on, maybe putting a stop to rent escalations year over year.
Yep.
Maybe asking for a concession, looking for ways to bring money in and save money at the same time. And I sit back, and I was saying this the other day with one of my partners, if we had that mindset 5-6 years ago, or a year or two before the pandemic, when the company as a whole was close to $90 million in overall sales.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
We could have banked a lot of money back then. But you know what? Back then, money's coming in, money's coming out.
Yes,
right? You want the big sexy office, right? And now I think people from the pandemic realize and learn they don't need that office anymore.
I see so many people consolidating.
And they're either operating remotely or working in a very small space, right? You look at it in the restaurants deals that you make, right? That you make with landlords. You say, you know what? I am not going to sign that shiny big restaurant on the corner of Main Street. I might look for a second gen restaurant, right? And I might not do $2 million, but maybe I do 1.6. But you know what? My capital cost going into that restaurant has been greatly diminished because it's a second generation restaurant. Like, there's
something would exist in infrastructure.
Infrastructure, and landlords these days, if it's a strong tenant and a good brand, are really making good deals. Something that I've never seen. I am looking at some deals, and it depends on the market.
Right.
All markets are different.
Yeah.
We are finding deals in certain marketplaces where the rents are less than they were in 2015. And you're talking about 10 years later. And in 2015, you sort of had a real estate boom in the commercial space. Rents were at an all-time high.
Yep.
I'll give you an example. We just opened 2 restaurants in Connecticut, one in Darien and one in Glastonbury. Right, they're further out. We're finding a lot of success in the suburbs. That's a good sort of.
I say it all the time.
It's sort of a good move for our brand. Like, we still have our urban footprint, but I feel like we're extremely lucky that our brand resonates in the suburbs. Right.
Yep.
So we have found success in the suburbs, and our suburban restaurants are coming back. So our growth strategy is suburban sort of expansion and move in that direction. We are finding rents in Connecticut markets and we already had 2 restaurants in Connecticut, Ridgefield and Sanford, that the rents are 30% less in these new markets than what they were in the existing, which is pretty crazy. Yeah. But it sort of tells you the state of the industry,
Yes.
As a whole. But yeah, that's the sort of long and short of of where we started, in between, and where we're heading.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. So that was a great story on how you started. Like I said, there's so many businesses that are trying to open up, especially in the restaurant industry, and we see it all the time. There's no success for, there's no formula for success. Everybody has their own unique story. And as you were talking, the one thing I was thinking is, what you feel was harder, expanding to 30 locations in 5 years or opening up your first restaurant?
That's a good question. Definitely the expansion was, I think opening that first restaurant was a lot more, what's the way I can put it? There was a lot more fear of it, like failing. We're going from a failed, it was open for 8 years, but we're going from a nightclub in Brooklyn that closes down sort of because of the financial crisis and the neighborhood changes, to opening up a new concept, and you're putting all your money and you're borrowing money and you're maxing out your credit cards. There's a lot of fear that, this thing, and mind you, you're opening up in 08, 09, restaurants are closing. Yeah. People don't, like I said, people don't have money to pay their mortgages. It's a scary time. And it's interesting enough, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I said, the cycle of our business is, we opened up in 2000 in Brooklyn. You have 9/11, that comes shortly after. You have a smoking ban that comes in New York that we thought would kill our business.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
Right? Right now, you can't even remember people smoking in restaurants. People used to smoke in airplanes.
Yes.
The last 10 rows. So you have, we thought that was going to kill our business.
Okay.
And it didn't. And then, 08, 09 rolls around, and then the pandemic is another. It's almost like it happens every decade.
Yeah.
Like you have a massive challenge that happens. So opening that was scary. There was a lot on the line. The expansion was, they're franchise deals. So you're putting up your own money with your resources, but somebody else is taking that risk alongside you. So they have.
You feel more comfortable.
Well, they have they have as much to gain and to lose alongside with you, and that's that's important.
Yes.
To have somebody that's committed like that and has their their money where their mouth is. And takes that chance alongside with you.
Now, what do you think, as far as you mentioned, right, 08 compared to the 2019 pandemic, what was the bigger challenge in your opinion?
08 is, everything is sort of within your control, right?
Yeah.
In a respect. 2020, 21, there's a lot of things that are not in your control.
Yeah.
When you can open, how you can open, what kind of service can you provide? Can you only do takeout and delivery? You can't. Half your dining room is open, half your dining room is closed. You got to ask, kids for vaccine proof to come into the restaurant. Yeah. Some of the stuff was. I understand the fear around it and why some of the stuff was done, but you look back on it now and you say, wow, how was. Once again, for another podcast for another day, how this pandemic was handled and how it affected the restaurant industry dependent on certain geographies in the country.
Yeah.
You look at, and I know a lot of restaurant people that are operating in the Florida markets, and they have different issues with, sort of hurricanes and flooding and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But they handled it a little bit differently. New York, had a much longer way back to come back, and it's not fully come back.
Well, that's what I was curious, right? From where you came from in 2020 when you did when you had to make those changes, right? Yeah. Does any of that, now that we're not fully back open, but we're fully operating now?
Yeah.
Do any of those changes still take place today, where you said, wait, this is actually good, I can make more with less here,
Yeah, you look for, we look for now, smaller restaurants, smaller footprints, because our business, it's not fully takeout and delivery, but it's definitely gone up. 15% more of our business is takeout and delivery.
Right.
So you can operate with a smaller dining room in that respect.
Okay.
You need to design your restaurants differently to accommodate for deliveries and takeout people coming into your restaurant. You got to do changes in the design and the way you operate, the people, sort of the branding and how you're branding your restaurants. But there's a lot of hidden challenges in our industry right now that a lot of people don't speak about. Right. And every opportunity I have, I speak about it, freely. There's been a tremendous increase in our energy costs. Our utility bills are up 40% compared 40%
year over year,
compared from 2020, right? And and every residential household will tell you the same.
Yeah.
It is the same for commercial places, for restaurants. Are something that you can't really put your finger on or really nail down is the cost of services, maintenance services. That same company that would come in and fix your heating unit or your AC unit has almost tripled in price. And they almost hold you ransom. It's like, there's something very weird going on in the labor market that nobody can really figure out. And what do I mean by that? We just opened up a restaurant in Glastonbury, Connecticut. It's a well-to-do neighborhood. We put out an ad for a GM in all our positions, and this has happened not only in our restaurant but previous openings that we've had. And I've spoken to other operators, and they tell me the same story. You'll have 50 people apply for the job, resumes coming in. 2 people will show up, 3 people will show up. One person will accept the job and then text you the next day saying that they changed their mind. And you're not talking about they're not low-paying jobs.
Yeah, of course.
And it's pretty remarkable to see. And like we sit there and say, it's like, what are we doing wrong? Should we be offering more? Are our incentives not in line? Is people's attitudes towards work changed? What is it that's going on? We've met so many people that not only have management jobs but then have side gigs or side hustles. They might be, Uber drivers at night or DoorDash drivers because they're trying to work all these different angles just to get by in this economy, which is the costs that have affected people has definitely affected traffic in our industry as a whole. And you have winners and you have losers, right? Yeah. And the winners right now are sort of the big brands, the big box brands, not all of them,
right?
But the ones that have really mastered great value, consistency, easy in, easy out. The ones that have mastered fantastic drive-through models.
Yep.
Chick-fil-A probably being the best example of that.
Oh yeah.
And then you have other restaurants like I've seen the great turnaround story with Chili's. Chili's, which everyone thought was a dead brand. 7,000, 10,000 square foot restaurants. TGIFs goes bankrupt. Applebee's, no one knows what's going on there.
Yeah.
And then Chili's is up 15%. And why? Because they've marketed this fantastic value for their meal. And people are like, hey, for $10, I can go get a burger, fries, appetizers, or whatever. Yep. It's the same when you go to a McDonald's.
Yes, and it's very good. Me and my family have gone to Chili's like 3 times in the last 6 months, and it's good. And it's all because something has changed. Yes.
And the way, and now you're seeing other those big. Like I just saw a commercial the other day. Applebee's trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
A $10 burger or a big fried chicken sandwich, and bottomless fries and a drink. Everyone is trying to get that elusive dollar from the guest, from the consumer right now, because they're just being very picky on where they're spending, their money, and they're looking for certain things, and we're adjusting to that as well. We're adjusting. Like we are introducing tremendous value in what we're offering. Like we're doing crazy, aggressive lunch specials, right?
Yeah.
To get that lunch business back. We're doing really good happy hours. We're really doing really good incentives for people to come back in the restaurant, because that money that comes out of your restaurant, whether it be takeout and delivery, is a whole long litany of fees that come along with that.
Yeah.
So us in the industry, we're trying to figure out how to recapture that business to get more dine-in business back, get more people to order from our native ordering system, our native site, instead of going to the third parties
Which can the fees.
I mean, the fees are as high as 30% in
It's
some
funny.
instances.
I texted Euripides a couple weeks ago, and I said, and I was going to get Bareburger over here, and I texted him from Grubhub, and I said, "Is this good?" And he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, order from our, and he's like, "How much did it save?"
It probably saved like 20% because we don't charge the service fees, the delivery fees.
Yeah.
We don't charge the markups on the menu to make up for those charges. And the difference is, and why people go to these Grubhub sites, it's a convenience. They get a loyalty package where maybe they don't pay for the fees. They can shop around all these different places. But at the end of the day, it is not. It's detrimental to the restaurant.
It's at least probably, I would say, 50% more when you're all said and done between tip, service fees, whatever it may be.
Easily.
50% more.
I did this experiment the other day. I actually went to our website. I picked out 4 burgers, and they were $70 with fries and all this stuff. Really good burgers. And at the end of the checkout, it was like $78 with tip.
Okay.
I went to one of the third-party sites, did identical order, and it was $105. And there was a $17 service fee, and you click it to see what it is. It has like that little question
of
mark
course,
icon,
you have it right.
and it says to pay for our ongoing expenses. We all have ongoing
expenses. Just be transparent, which they are.
It's
in a way.
trying to get your guests to realize that it is more beneficial to them and the restaurant to order directly from the restaurant. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
People are. Creatures of habit.
Yes.
It's hard to break in. When they come to your site, it has to be worth it to them. Like the process has to be simple, clean, sort of seamless.
Yes.
And there has to be a benefit to them, either loyalty or some sort of price value to them with that. So
there has to be simplicity. I love to do, like, one of the big things I like to do in accounting for my clients is I love trend analysis, right? I like to compare month to month to month. See, how the trends are going with your revenue, your COGS, your cost of goods sold, your labor, right? I want to see, how you compare month to month, and you can really get down to the fine details of what's going on, And one of the things I've been noticing year over year, especially this year, is revenue's up, and you're making less money, right? That's because expenses are back up. Where the problem is. So, like, the one thing I wanted to ask you is, how are you dealing with cost of goods sold, meat, dairy, payroll, right? Like, those are the biggest challenges. When I talk to restaurant owners, right, and we're sitting down in a quarterly meeting, it's the same problem over and over again. They can't contain their labor, right? With food costs, right? I give an example, let's automate this, right? Use inventory modules, right, that show you your price fluctuation so you can see, like, I'm paying way too much for meat. I got to go to a different vendor, So what are you doing to contain those costs with food, labor, and, general and admin costs?
Yeah. There's a lot of levers you can pull to manage that stuff. With food costs, you have to go back to your distributor, number one, and negotiate better deals for distribution. And then you have to pick vendor to vendor. It's your distributor first. That's the one who's driving the food to your restaurant. Okay. Then you have to go vendor to vendor to vendor to vendor and shop them and have them. And I'll give you an example, like French fries, right?
Yeah.
It's not only Lamb Weston. There's McCain. There's Simplot. There's Rossett House. You got to get them all in a room. Obviously, pick the best product for your restaurant, and then have them bid for the price, and work it that way. And if it's even $1. That dollar adds up tremendously over the year and over the lifetime of a restaurant. And just imagine it's $5 or $2, right?
Yeah.
You do that. You definitely need to have budgets for purchasing that you hold your manager or your kitchen manager, and you hold them by the fire, and you say, you have to live within this budget. And that is constant diligence, work. You got to put the effort in. You're not just going to look at the number on this. You have to really monitor it week to week. And if they go over their budget, ask them why they're going over their budget. What did they over order? Check that. Set your number. And we've done a good job. We've done a good job managing the food costs. The labor, it's the same principle.
Okay.
You schedule your labor. You have your projected labor, and then you have your actual labor. And there's a lot of technology and a lot of tools that you can use. 7 Shifts is the one we use to schedule our labor. It can project your labor. It can project your sales. So there's a lot of good sort of AI tools that are built into these softwares now, which is amazing to see.
Yeah.
AI affecting our industry is going to be fascinating, and we'll see how that plays out in the next few years.
How do you feel about it?
That's a whole other podcast. In a nutshell, I'll tell you how I feel about it. I feel that there's a lot of fake companies that are offering services on AI that are not real.
Yep.
And then I think there's some very legitimate providers out there, but I think those providers will be very beneficial to the biggest players in our industry.
Okay.
But then it'll eventually trickle down to everyone else. That's how I think it. That's how I think it sort of
You're
plays
right.
out.
You're right about that. Yeah.
Because there's a tremendous amount of resource and expense that you need to put into AI to find and figure it out, and for it to produce income for you, or savings for you, or generate revenue.
Okay.
So
Labor, what you were talking about.
labor. It's the same principle with the food. You have to be diligent. You got to stick within your budget. And this is very hard for managers to do. If it's not busy, and this rarely happens, but we try to make it happen. But now you're dealing with labor laws too. You send people home early if it's not busy. And then you say, okay, I'm going to send somebody home 1 hour early in the day because maybe I'm not as busy as I thought I was going to be, right?
Okay.
That's $16, right?
Yeah.
Because that's or $17, and you do that 5 times a week, right? That's $100 a week,
Yeah.
right? That's $200 a year.
Yep.
Add that up over 30 restaurants, and you're now talking about $150,000 a year.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
Yeah.
Every single penny. The problem with the labor that we've seen is the turnover, the resources that you have to put to train people that were not in this industry or are new to this industry. Then they find out they don't like it. This was one of the lingering effects of the pandemic, especially for the tri-state area, especially for New York. A lot of the people that this industry was like their livelihood, and while they were pursuing other career ventures, whether it be in the arts or there were students, it sort of has shifted. They're in our industry, but not really. And a lot of them left the area as a whole. They left. They went to other states because of just everything that was happening here. We haven't come back from that.
Yeah.
Once again, almost impossible to measure. It's almost like anecdotal, but we see it. And almost every operator that I speak to bemoans we have the same sort of complaints with that. But you know what? It could be a lesson for us on how to navigate, how to change, how to evolve, how to look at our business, how to schedule differently, a lot of different things that you could do.
Do you give them incentives, like as far as like your GMs, like if they're keeping labor at
A ton of incentives. Their whole bonuses are tied into their budgets, their performance. One of the big things for the front of house is, which I've seen has worked tremendously for a lot of our restaurants, is how many reviews they can get on the restaurants, how many Google reviews they can get for the restaurants.
Really?
We have some really cool tools where a guest can leave feedback, and we speak to them directly through text, through certain platforms. It's really cool. And that connection that you really need to make again with your guests.
Dude, are they doing that? Like I would find
100%.
Really?
Not all, 90% of the time. And when they don't, we're on top of them. Say, hey, make sure you reach out to this guest, rectify this issue, fix this issue. You cannot afford to lose a guest and lose that recurring visit from that guest.
That is great.
Make it right at whatever cost.
Yeah.
And 90% of the times it works. And people are actually shocked when they get a text message back from a GM or from the restaurant, when they might send out a message and say, hey, I ordered and my sauces were missing, order of French fries was missing, and then in 5 minutes somebody sends you back a text, I'm really sorry this happened, let me give you a refund, let me give you a credit, let me give you some loyalty. It really builds a nice, and people are shocked when I tell you. People, number one, the first question is like, am I talking to a human or is this a robot?
Yeah.
Who sent me this message? And then number two, they're extremely grateful that somebody reached out to them.
Yes.
And is like trying to fix, the problem.
You're so right. Me and my wife and a couple friends, we went over. I won't say the restaurant's name, but we went to a restaurant in town, and we had a reservation. A couple of our guests didn't show up on time, so they said, sit at the bar. We'll sit you in a little bit. What happened was that the hostess gave away our seat, didn't tell us, and my wife and her friend got very angry with the woman, and
rightfully so.
Yeah.
So.
So anyway, we're not going back to that restaurant. I loved the food. I want to go back there. My wife will not budge. She will not go back there. But and she said it simple. If she would have just came over and just said, I'm sorry, or reached out after, gave us
around the
something,
around the dessert, something.
Nothing.
Something.
She didn't give us anything. So now she lost a customer for life, right? Like, I think that's so valuable.
And the old adage goes in our industry, right?
Yeah.
You will tell that story to probably 25 to 30 different people. That bad experience, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you have a really good experience, you might tell 5.
Yeah.
But that bad experience, and I know you're not going to mention the name here.
Yeah.
But after you'll mention it to me.
Yeah.
And you'll tell other people and say, hey, and then that greatly affects that business. And
Yes.
what we do with Google reviews is that the restaurants that do really well with it, the servers will approach every table when they're dropping off that check and be like, if you had a really good time, write a Google review,
right?
And then there'll be a QR code that can guide them to that. Mention my name as the server, right? And then we give them a little perks for that. Those restaurants that have done that, when I tell you their sales are up close to 15 to 20% year over year, the ones that are consistent with it, it is remarkable.
Really?
And it is something that we're gonna consistently hone in and focus on. And it's not only the getting the reviews and getting the traction for it, it's that interaction with that guest, it's that experience with that guest, which they don't expect necessarily in a burger restaurant.
No.
Go to a 5-star restaurant and you're spending $100, $50 a head, expect it, demand it. But not when you come into a casual place and you get that kind of service. When it's done right, it's extremely effective.
Well, I think they appreciate the transparency with you, and that you're going out of your way to say we care.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. It's so rare to find.
Yeah.
This is great, man. Two other things I just want to get into. I'm an aspiring person that wants to get into the restaurant business, right? What advice would you give somebody that's looking to open up a restaurant? What would be something?
Where do you want me to start, Sonny? All right. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way. The easy stuff is getting your menu, your concept, your brand. You have that all figured out, or you think you have it all figured out, right? The next most crucial part of the whole process for them, and it's the old adage, it's the location. But besides the fact of the location being good or bad, it's the details of that location, right? It's that lease that you need to negotiate with that landlord. And a lot of new people, maybe who are going into this industry or this business, who don't have the advice or the experience of other restaurateurs or the backing of it or other high-paid, they'll make extreme mistakes in their negotiations with their lease, which could be the end of their business.
Sure.
And I'll tell you some of the mistakes that they make. They might sign guarantees for the length of the lease, right?
Right.
Or they might sign full personal guarantees of the lease. They might not ask for enough free rent for the lease. They might not ask for what we call TI, tenant improvement, that a landlord, if it's a established landlord, will give you money towards the improvements of their property.
Right.
There's a lot of things that young people who are going into this business just don't know how to maneuver around. And then there's a lot of things that they don't look into, and it's almost too late. And I'll give you a short story.
Yeah.
We opened up a fantastic barbecue restaurant in Astoria. It was called Salt and Bone. Maybe one of the best barbecue I've had, right? And I've had barbecue in, from Texas to some barbecue places in the Carolinas. It was phenomenal, right? What were the mistakes of that place? You project a restaurant to do, call it $3 million, right? Mm-hmm. And you have your model there with your lease number, your occupancy. The restaurant does $2 million, right?
All right.
So now your occupancy has gone from 8% to 14%, let's say 15%.
Okay.
You're already behind the 8 ball, right?
Yeah, sure.
Your energy bill you thought was going to be $4,000, but for some reason it's now $6,000 because there's something inefficient with the property.
Okay.
You realize that half of the property that you had, and this is really a real story for that place.
Yeah.
30% of the building is sitting on New York City property, and it's a sidewalk license. It's not part of the rent, an extra $40,000 a year. You negotiate part of the lease, which was sloppily negotiated on our behalf, was that the tax increases over the years should be limited to a tenant. But in this lease, any tax increase was put on us. So when the taxes on that property went from $30,000 to $75,000 a year, that extra $45,000 is now our expense. These are all the details in the lease that we didn't see, overlooked, just went through, and all those things add up and will end up being what can determine the failure or the success of the restaurant. And then outside of once you get past that.
Is that also hiring the right lawyer too? To be able to see?
Hire the right lawyer and then just doing the research before. I mean, there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
I guarantee you can type into any search engine right now, what are the 10 pitfalls of signing a commercial lease? And I bet you some AI generative tool will throw out 100 different things that you should look for.
Yeah.
And those are the measures that you should look at. But a lot of young people going to say just don't know that. You know,
Yeah,
they
of
don't know
course.
that, and they'll blindly sign because they're so excited to open up their space.
All emotion, no logic.
Yeah, and then once you get past that and you get to the opening, the doom of many places is just reckless spending. It's reckless spending, and when I say reckless spending, I don't mean parking your Porsche outside. I mean, reckless spending is not managing your labor, not managing your food costs. You need to be under 60%.
Yep.
These days,
I say that all the time. Yeah.
And if you can hit 55%, you're doing well. I mean, you need the sales too.
Yes.
But you need to hit those marks. And I can't tell you how many operators I tell you that I've met, and they operate they're in the 70s. Yeah. Which means unless they're doing tremendous volume, if they're in the 70s, they're not in a good.
Yeah, you're
place.
talking 30% COGS, right? 40% labor.
And then you start adding up all the other fees if they're on third-party platforms, 7% there, right?
People don't realize what those fees
Your
are.
insurance has gone up, your taxes have gone up, your energy bills has gone up, and then before you know it, you're left with 2%, 1%, or you're negative. And then this is a tough business. You put in a lot of hours. So many people coming out of everything that's happened in the last few years saying, is it worth my effort, right? Is it worth the headache? Is it worth the risk? That's something that, just keep that in mind when you're going into this, in business. And then you can be one of the lucky few that hits the right chord, has the right brand, has the right backers, the right location at the right moment, and you can be gangbusters.
When you say that, just think of how many things have to go right, Like
How many things, yeah. And what's crazy, this day and age, and it's I talk about it all the time. You see these Instagram posts where there's a 4-hour line, waiting.
Sure.
I saw one the other day for who's the guy that does the cheesesteaks? Bradley Cooper.
Yes,
He's a big Philly guy.
He just opened up the shop. Yep.
He opened up a place in the city. And he has one thing on the menu. It's a cheesesteak.
Steak, yes.
Looks really good. It's a big,
It does, yeah.
12-foot hero full of sesame, semolina roll.
Yeah.
And there's a line of there's a 6-hour line.
Yes.
Who knows how long that line lasts when Bradley Cooper's no longer working
there.
Because he's working there right now chopping up cheesesteaks, right?
Yeah.
But when that, and that's something that a really good restaurant guy had said to me many, many years ago. He said, you can really manage your business. I go, it's easy to manage your business when you have lines out the door.
Of course.
Right? But those lines don't exist forever,
Yep.
right? You're not going to be as busy as you were forever. Some are,
Yep.
but more times than none, you're not.
Yes.
Your traffic bottoms out, comes down, comes back up. You need to, if you can figure out how to manage your business at those times when your traffic and the lines are not, around the corner, then you figured this business out.
Yes.
Right? Because those lines don't last forever.
And
right?
I felt the same way with ERC and PPP. Everybody was all high off that money, and then it all ran out.
Yeah,
and
honestly,
trying to manage cash.
It was a boon for the industry. It was a lifesaver.
Yep.
But there was detrimental effects of it too. And you just mentioned it. It was like a freewheeling spending.
Yep.
Because some of these restaurants were getting huge checks.
Oh, big checks. Yes.
And some people closed up shop. And
Yes.
some people put it back in the business. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on over there. But to sort of wrap it all up, it's all about a mindset. And I think new restaurant folks have to go into with this mindset that forget the glamour and the glory and the glitz. That lasts for a quick minute.
Right.
It's the other 59 minutes in that hour. It's all work, you know. And if you really want to make it, be professional, operate a tight ship, be good to your people. Obviously, respect your guests. They're the ones who pay your bills at the end of the day, and run a good operation. And try to be one of those lucky ones that sort of make it past that. We've had record number of bankruptcies in 2024 in the restaurant industry, and I see that continuing into 2025.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
And some of them won't make the news because they're really small, and some of them, the big ones, will. But it's those challenges are there,
I see it all over the place. Reading in the Journal, all these franchises out west that are closing down like crazy. They're talking about, Last question: the future of Bareburger. Where are we going? What's going on? What's the new direction you guys are heading in?
It's a new, but it's almost like an old direction, right?
Okay.
The new direction is to grow smarter this time around, right? open up we'll open up in Connecticut more restaurants. We'll open up some more restaurants in Long Island. We'll figure out how to, open up some more restaurants in our surrounding market.
Suburbans, like you said, right?
We're not going to take opportunities for somebody saying, hey, I want to go open up in the Carolinas. And I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to say, hey, you want to open up? Open up in a neighboring place where our distributor can service you, where our marketing can serve. And I'll give you an example. We opened up in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Glastonbury, Connecticut is probably 3 hours from here, right?
Okay.
Maybe 3.5 hours. That's a long way out.
Yep.
2.5 hours from New York City. Do you know that restaurant just opened 3 weeks ago? And I can't tell you how many people have come into that restaurant who remember the brand from being in the city or being in Queens. And I'm thinking to myself, how did these people move out?
Yeah, all the way
out here. And, they moved out during the pandemic. They found nice suburbs that were good schools, good areas, and they decided to move their families to. You know how fascinating that is?
Of course, yeah.
But that's the brand. If I were to open up in Raleigh, North Carolina, I'm not going to get that response.
No.
So right away, that restaurant opens. It's already known. People already have an idea of what it is.
Yep.
They're excited that it's opening, and the restaurant is busy. So it's fascinating to see how much brand awareness resonates with the brand. So there's a lot of white space where we can sort of open up that way. And then I'm always tinkering with an idea of a different model, a burger and a chicken that is super affordable, super small build out, super high quality, that is very relevant to this time right now, where people are just looking for, hey man, I can spend $50, I can go feed my whole family and get a really good, fun meal and bring the cost down of construction, startup costs. That's something that I always have on the back of my mind that I'm sort of tinkering with, and see if I have the opportunity, if we have the opportunity to do that as well. But, to be honest with you, something that I've also learned, and some people have done a much better job with this than we have, they try to do a bunch of different concepts all under one umbrella. And if that's the restaurateur that you are, that's great. I'm a restaurant group. I have an Italian concept. I have a Mediterranean concept. I have a grill concept. And you can all operate that.
Sure.
Us is, we found the formula that works, that constantly needs tweaking. It could always be better.
Right.
But it survived the last 15 years through a roller coaster of events. Some of them internal, some of them external.
Yep.
It survived all that, and now can make its sort of comeback. Focus on that. That is where, and it might sound boring to do the same thing consistently over and over and over again, but it pays the bills.
Yes,
right?
100%. Yes.
Restaurants open, and this day we can open up a Bareburger restaurant in some of these markets, and out the gate, they make enough money to pay all their bills.
And hamburgers never go out of style. It's never
they do and they don't. Type of hamburgers. So
yeah.
So that's and my goal is for this year especially is consolidate our group, open some more restaurants, and by the end of 2026, because I live in the now, I work in the now, but I also look where we could be in 2-3 years,
of course,
and you
vision.
work towards that.
Yeah,
we can be back. By the end of 26, I'll be back to 2019 revenue with a different mindset. And that'll make all the difference for our business and our brands. And that's a valuable lesson to people that have gone through, have been around this game or this industry for quite a bit, to come to that sort of realization that your brand can come back after everything that's happened.
Right.
And just operate with a different diligence, a different mindset, and you can do a lot better this time around. And that's sort of how I'm looking at things.
That's awesome, man.
And that's the message. And that's the message I give to my managers. That's the message I give to our franchisees.
Yeah.
That, hey man, we've been through hell and back these last 4 years, but we're still here, and now we have an opportunity to grow again, grow smarter. We can grab those second generation restaurants for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Which you didn't have that mindset back then, and yeah, maybe you're not doing, our restaurants used to do $2.5 million a year, AUV. Now we're like 2 million, 2.1, because some city restaurants haven't come back, but the suburban restaurants are up in that 2 million range.
Right.
But you find second generation suburban restaurants that you can open up for $300,000-$400,000, your ROI is 2 years.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's a fascinating. That's a great place to be in. It's a great place to angle your brand to operate in. But
Wow.
like I said, we could talk about that
No, that's
for
great.
Another. You invite me back, son.
Yeah,
we'll
no,
talk
this
about
was
that.
great. I felt like this was so beneficial, to our audience, especially all the restaurant owners out there, that have done it wrong or are looking to open up a restaurant.
Everyone does it wrong, Sonny. There's like you have to do it wrong to learn
Yes.
to do it right.
Yes.
And some people will take the advice of others, and some people have to make that mistake on their own before they realize that they need to make a change or evolve to a different way.
You're
of
so
operating.
right. I love studying people that are very successful. I read books on it all the time, and it's just the trend I always see is they've all failed so many times, and that's where their biggest achievements have come, and if you're not getting uncomfortable, you're not growing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
100%.
it's
Well
this,
said.
yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
This has been great. I want to thank Euripides EP for coming down and talking to you guys. I want to wish everybody also a happy new year, and we'll see you on our next episode soon. Thank you and have a great day.